It's on.
Alrighty. So, hello everybody. I'm going to be speaking on specifically human trafficking and the research I did at Creighton University. I mentioned the authors and then our mentor, Dr. Beck Muratova. But I'm first going to start with just like a foundation of human trafficking because a lot of people don't have a lot of education or awareness of this topic. So I'm going to first start with that and then I'm going to talk about my research. Okay, so first it's like a case video. It's only like, I think roughly 3.5 minutes long. And it kind of demonstrates the realness of this issue and that this girl is kind of like a normal human being that has been trafficked. Just to kind of show you an example. And if you can't see that, that's okay.
I was born and raised in a small town in Southern Oregon, and I was a good kid in school. I grew up in a normal middle-class family. I got great grades. I was really active in sports, and I even graduated a year early. I was accepted into Oregon State University, and I had my dorm room already assigned, and I was really excited to move up to Corvallis. But that summer I got pregnant by my boyfriend, and I had to make a real tough decision whether I was going to keep my baby and unenroll from university or get an abortion and keep it all a secret. That was a really tough summer for me. After I had the baby, I had some friends that had gone up to U of O to go to college, and they had an extra room in one of their apartments. It was at that time that I met a boy or a guy who pretended to take interest in me. I really thought he liked me, and we got along really well. He was really funny and charming, and he had a nice car, and he always picked up the tab. He had nice clothes. He told me he was a record producer, that he had a band up in Portland, and that's why he frequently went out of town. There's a saying that says when you take a child by the hand, you take the mother by the heart. And I really think that's what happened for me, because I had this new little girl and this man who showed this desperate attention towards her, like he wanted to really help make this family that I really wanted for my daughter. And he invited me to move in with him after about 6 months of dating, and I was really excited. And I brought him down to Southern Oregon to meet my family, and everything seemed fine until we arrived in Las Vegas. He said we were moving there because that was the entertainment capital of the world, and being a record producer and having a band, that's where they were going to get the most gigs and the most jobs, and that's where his job was leading him. So I desperately wanted to go with him, to be with him, and to start this family that he promised me. He pulled up to an escort service, and he said, "This is how it works in Vegas. I've spent a lot of money to get you here. I put first and last on an apartment. I filled your fridge up with food, and you're going to need to earn that money back." And I felt trapped. I felt like, how am I going to get out of this? And you didn't know if you were going to live or die. You didn't know what he was going to do or what he was capable of, and so it was really scary. I can remember just running through the casino thinking, like, these people don't even have a clue what's going on. They're just, cha-ching, cha-ching, Las Vegas, yay! And they're doing all this stuff, and I'm running for my life. I'm running from a man that has forced me into doing things that I didn't want to do. When you have a trafficker that's waiting at home with your child and says, if you don't bring home $1,500, you're going to find your daughter out on the corner, I think I was probably more frightened to go home than I was to be in the room. Because if you got robbed, it was your fault for being stupid. If you got raped, it was your fault for not watching your back. Anything that happened to you was typically your fault, and you incurred more punishment for allowing those things to happen to you. So it made you always walk in fear of your trafficker.
Alright, so that was kind of a very heavy video. And just a forewarning, if anyone needs to get up and leave during this topic, it's okay, it's not gonna offend me. It is a very heavy topic, so. I'm gonna first start with kind of like the foundation and the principles behind human trafficking. So human trafficking is the labor or commercial sex exploitation of a person through enlistment, transportation, transfer, or sheltering of that person by means of verbal threat, physical force, or coercion for benefits of money or power. The industry is $150 billion worth of crime. It's the second largest right now. The leading crime right now is cyber theft. And the two main types of human trafficking is labor and sexual human trafficking. They did a study, and this study in Nebraska showed that 57%, they were surveying survivors, 57% of them that had been out of trafficking went to a medical professional, and 57% were never screened during that time that they had seen a healthcare professional. Most victims of trafficking do see a medical professional at some point. Doesn't mean usually the trafficker's with them, but sometimes they do allow them to come to medical appointments. There's a statistic, this one's also in Nebraska, that 88% of people that are trafficked do see some sort of medical care, and that most being in the ER, which that makes sense to most people, but it's also in clinics, it's also in reproductive health, it's basically, it can be anywhere. The average age of human trafficking is 11 to 15 years old, and the average time that someone's trafficked is 5 years old, or 5 years for a time span. And 77% of people in the United States are legal residents, and then the 25 roughly percent are of foreign, from a foreign country. There are negative mental, physical, social, and reproductive outcomes that come from trafficking, and I will touch on those later. This leads to isolation, and then that also leads to not fully reintegrating into the community if they have all these outcomes that are coming with being trafficked and being a survivor. So everyone potentially could be trafficked, unfortunately, but there are groups that are more at risk. Women and children are 80% more at risk for being trafficked. If you had a history of abuse as a child, if you have a disability, if you are homeless, if you don't have a parental figure in your life, if you have a history of substance abuse or currently using substances right now. As a healthcare professional, these are three main groups you can look for red flags: behaviorally, physically, and environmentally. The first group is physically, so those are like your bruises in different stages, cuts. Some traffickers will brand their victims, and they have things such as like daddy on them, just very weird tattoos that look kind of out of the blue. Sometimes they'll hide them, but sometimes they will be visible. Malnourishment, frequent testing for STDs, STIs, which wouldn't be with us, but with medical doctors, they would see a frequent pattern of that, and then poor hygiene. Behaviorally, you could see people refusing care that you're going to be recommending, inconsistent stories when you're asking them what happened to them, hesitant to answer questions about their injury, and they lack eye contact often. Environmentally, most of these people, when they do see a healthcare professional, they have their trafficker with them. And so signs of this would be if they're trying to control everything to say when you're asking them questions, if they're trying to fill out documentation, etc. And then often these people don't have a permanent address because they're always on the go, so that's also a sign. So the gold standard for how to address these survivors is trauma-informed care, which I'm sure most of you have heard of, but just a little bit about. And you can be trained in this. Hospitals can be trained like statewide. Jill mentioned that some of the doctors here are trauma-informed.
The ER staff.
ER
so
staff.
Mary Gross has taken advanced training, and
Okay.
then some of the
our nurses. Yeah, as well. So there are trainings online. You can also just be trauma informed as a healthcare professional. The 6 main principles of being trauma informed are safety, trustworthiness, peer support, collaboration, empowerment, and humility and responsiveness. So this is any agency or program that pretty much provides services and interventions to these people that are survivors or victims of human trafficking. So there is not a gold standard for screening these individuals, unfortunately. There are a lot of tools out on the internet. You also, if you get formal training, they would usually provide you a formal screen that you could provide. The main thing with screening these people, if you're seeing these red flags, is you don't want to discuss things, you want to identify things. So simple questions, yes and no, because these victims are not going to want to talk and discuss these things. They might not discuss this stuff for years, you know. So just identifying the facts, so then you're able to report it, rather than open-ended questions that could cause more trauma. Some challenges that we found in our literature review are for identifying these victims of human trafficking would be a lack of training, lack of education on just the topic, lack of resources, and then with that comes lack of confidence. And when you're not trained, you're not going to feel confident in identifying these people. You might just you might think you're overthinking something. So those are the main challenges we see. So next I'm going to talk specifically about my research that I did at Creighton. We did a qualitative study. We were going to do a mixed method study and do a full survey nationwide, but we actually kind of ran out of time and we didn't get the grant we thought we were going to, but so ours is qualitative. And ours is from the perspective of the occupational therapy profession. Most of the studies that are out there are mostly on the survivor's point of view and their needs. And we wanted to really see how our profession as a whole is equipped and aware of this topic. So our purpose was to explore occupational therapists' awareness of human trafficking and their capacity to provide services to facilitate community reintegration for human trafficking survivors. So our methods, we interviewed 8 currently practicing OTs in Nebraska. That was a convenient sample. Each interview was an hour long, and we transcripted and coded all the themes to see our results. This is a breakdown, obviously you can't really see this well, but this is a breakdown of our therapists. So we had one from a residential treatment program, inpatient acute, community health, outpatient peds, outpatient neuro, and outpatient, just general outpatient. So our first theme that we discovered was the awareness and the knowledge of OTs for human trafficking. So half of the interviewees had training, but we did include if they had any type of training in school, which is very little, but some did have some minimal training. 3 out of 8 interviewees were able to verbalize both the types of trafficking, which means that less than half were aware of this topic. Our second theme was our role and experience in rehab. So 4 stated that they would only feel comfortable treating these survivors if it was in a group, like interprofessionally, PT, OT, doctors, nurses, such like that. 1 said that they would feel completely comfortable and that they've had training, and 1 said that they would not feel comfortable until they had training. Their main roles that they discussed would be building rapport, providing resources, and referring those people to other healthcare professionals, since our role right now is so limited until there's further research done. So our role mainly, all of our interviewees discussed that education, advocacy, spreading awareness on the topic just in general, and educating at-risk populations such as youth people at schools, really diving into that prevention piece, since we do have such a limited role as of right now in the true rehab of these survivors. The potential aspects that we could have a role in for reintegration would be ADLs and IADLs. Sometimes these people have such negative mental health outcomes that it debilitates them from pretty much everything. They don't have any roles or routines when they get out of that situation. So even ADLs, such as taking a shower, can be very triggering for them. So ADLs, they would start with, and then IADLs for the long term. So job skills, money management, going to the grocery store, because even those places can be also triggering for them. Restoring roles, routines, and participation in meaningful occupations. I mean, most of these people have been completely stripped of their life and their identity, so even engaging in any sort of meaningful occupation is important. The last theme that we discovered was our perceived potential challenges from the interviewees. Time was one of the main ones. Reimbursement rate. A lot of these people just want to sit and talk because they do have a lot of mental health outcomes that are negative, and reimbursement rates, unfortunately, just aren't as good as normal ones. Lack of buy-in from other healthcare professionals, such as doctors, who we'd be getting our referrals from. They don't really know our role in that, so we need to educate others. And then lack of resources and lack of funding for programming. So I kind of discussed our conclusion. So we were one of the very first studies to address it from the OT's perspective, not the victims or survivors' point of view, which is different. We also hope that this informs further research for OT's role in reintegration. OTs are aware of the topic, but we do need increased training and resources and increased research just to continue our role with this huge issue. Our study findings indicate that OTs can play a significant role in ADLs, IDLs, and advocating for our profession. I actually kind of recently just found this. This is an act that was sponsored by Congressman Steve Cohen, and it was funded and signed by the president in 2018. It's called the SOAR to Health and Wellness Act of 2018. And essentially it expands funding for data-driven training and technical assistance needed for places like hospitals, clinics, to raise awareness and to get more training on this topic. And they also have online resources, in-person trainings, which probably aren't going to be happening right now, but it is a resource. And then what can you do? I know this topic can seem really daunting and really huge, like you can't make a huge difference in it. But this first link, I can send it out to. It's a really interesting tool. It kind of demonstrates the impact that labor trafficking and sex trafficking have on like the simple products you use in your daily life, like food, products, all that stuff. So it impacts the supply chain. So you really can get a good visual of how it's impacting you. Kind of puts it in perspective. You can watch documentaries. You can educate others on this human trafficking topic, such as I am right now. Encourage local school districts to include human trafficking for youth because they are a very high at-risk group for human trafficking. And just look up your local resources for these individuals if you were to come across one. There's online toolkits specifically for healthcare professionals. Each state, I think, has, I know Iowa, Nebraska, and the surrounding states do. I think most of them do. It's a toolkit, and the purpose is to educate staff, have screening tools. It can help ensure hospital policies have immediate actions, and then it can develop regional partnerships throughout to your community. These at the end are just resources. I won't go through them in depth, but one thing to note is the Iowa Network Against Human Trafficking and Slavery is like the best resource list ever. They have resources from all over, all counties, all communities, transitional housing, resources, documentaries, just everything. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for it. So I would highly recommend that if you're interested in looking at resources. And those are my final resources, and let me know if you guys have any questions.
I do. Why did you choose this topic for your research?
So, to be honest, I didn't choose it, but our mentor was trained in research for abuse with women and children and trauma. And so we had discussed, we had actually seen a documentary in one of our classes like the week before, and we told her, we're like, this could be really cool. Like, I mean, we could help these individuals with those simple things like ADLs, IADLs, that job skill, money management type thing. She's like, that's a really cool thing. Let's see if it's out there. Let's see if like your profession is, doing anything for them. And there really wasn't any research on it, so that's why we chose this.
So your OTs that you interviewed, were they strictly from the CHI system? Because I know Creighton was integrated with them,
Yep.
or how did you find your OTs that you worked with?
Yeah, so we essentially it was pretty much kind of a just people we knew, knew. They weren't all related to Creighton, but there was some sort of connection to Creighton somehow. So that's we just did informal outreach to therapists that we knew. So, yeah. Any more questions?
From a treatment standpoint, with
Yeah.
these going back to ADLs and IADLs, and there may not be any research on it
Yeah.
either, but was this going back to more like a coping and habituation afterwards, or was it kind of revisiting the trauma and then building all the way from there, or has there been any research on that at all?
There has been very limited research on that. It would be mostly working through the trauma of it, because a lot of them, they're not gonna be taking showers, they're not gonna be doing those basic ADLs even in some of these trafficking situations. So being able to kind of do the mental health side of things, and then also the habilitation side of things is what we found, but there's very limited research.
Do you have any idea how prevalent it is, like in Iowa?
So I think I might have put it on there, maybe not, in
It says 90.
2019,
You have it on here.
yeah.
98,
No, you're good.
98 reported cases.
Yeah, 98 reported cases in 2019.
And, you would just report to DHS like you would.
Yes, yep, so
Okay.
there's a hotline, and then you would, since we're
Like the
mandatory
DHS
reporters.
hotline, or is there a separate hotline for human trafficking?
There's a separate hotline for human trafficking.
Oh.
And this is, I didn't print one out for everyone, just if you're interested. This is from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and it's all their data from 2019. So if you're interested, I can just show this to you. But the majority of them, the way that they called themselves in was texting, actually. That was the most common way that they reported, which was very interesting to me.
Oh, so
But-
it's like a self-report hotline.
well, and you can call in and
We,
report.
like you could call. and
Yep,
report
as a
somebody else
yep,
too.
yep, as an individual, yep.
So as a facility, we, within the past 5 years, we actually do have policies and procedures pertaining to human trafficking. So that, I believe, is on the intranet, under admin, and you'll be able to find those and see what they are. I can ask Kim Wheeler, and then we'll get them sent out.
Yeah.
Our representative, I would start with Mary Groves, so if you do question something, or even have some information, definitely let me know, and then I would go to Mary Groves. That would be my next step, because she does have advanced training in, working with sexual assault survivors, victims, survivors, and then going from there. So she knows the process and what we need to do at the state level in reporting. Yeah. If you were to stand in front of a physician and justify why these individuals would benefit from OT, what would you say?
I would probably say that they've been completely stripped away from everything. And as a therapist, we have so many ways to rehabilitate them, through ADLs, IADLs, those roles and routines, and just those life skills in general. And we would probably take it from like a mental health kind of standpoint, and probably tag team with some type of mental health professional. So, yeah.
I think it's really interesting, like, as OTs, like OT started in mental health, and
Mhm.
OT has gone so far from mental
Yeah.
health.
It has.
Yeah, so it's like, sometimes I just completely
Yeah.
forget about that realm.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I would think from a reimbursement standpoint, you would be able to bill self-cares,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
I think you could if you
Yeah.
identified you could identify social
Mhm.
deficit, which I don't know exactly, we don't do a lot of that here.
Yeah.
I'm sure mental health therapists,
Yeah.
OTs in mental health.
Yeah.
Right, I
community
mean, a lot of
health we do.
EHUs have an OT
A
on
lot
staff.
of it.
Well, and the one of our interviewees, she has the clinic in Creighton it's like kind of through Creighton, but it's a non-for-profit house. Well, thank you everybody for listening to this.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.